Clarity, the elusive state of knowing exactly what you want in any given moment. As a solo small business owner, clarity can be hard to find sometimes. There are so many ideas out there about what we should want, as well as how we should go about getting it. And let's not forget the shoulds that define what success is supposed to look like for us. With all the shoulds we have to step around when building our life and our business of our dreams, it is easy to lose sight of clarity. So, today I thought I would share how I recently reclaimed my clarity so that I could get this silly episode recorded and go on vacation. Welcome to The Solo Grind, your weekly coffee break with me, a fellow solo business owner who knows firsthand that even the best laid plans don't always go as planned, and clarity sometimes hides behind a strong cup of coffee. So grab a snack and snuggle in with your kitty cat, and let's talk about what it really looks like to keep moving forward even when things get a little bit crazy. This has been one of those chaotic weeks where it's hard to know which end is up. I've had quite a few more obligations come up than what is typically normal for me, and a fair amount of meetings and appointments on my schedule. Plus, I had 2 full days out of the office, all while trying to get ready for a vacation to Mexico. With all the chaos happening, clarity was incredibly elusive, especially when planning out this week's episode. I knew I wanted to talk about reflection and momentum and how to use these to plan for the new year. I had tons of ideas, concepts, and even some stories of struggle and triumphs that I could share to help talk about what was on my mind. But every single one of these ideas and thoughts were all jumbled up in my head and they kept bouncing off of each other. It was like someone emptied a dump truck full of bouncy balls into a rubber padded room inside of my brain. And pulling together a few clear thoughts was starting to feel quite impossible. I think I must have started 4 or 5 new brainstorming documents to get clarity on what it was I wanted to share. I did multiple brain dump sessions into my AI software, hoping that it would help me organize all the thoughts into a list of more coherent themes. I even tried hitting the record button to see what came out, as sometimes actually having a conversation and then listening back to it helps me know what I actually do want to share in an episode. Nothing was working. As my deadline of creation was approaching, I was starting to get a little bit panicked. I knew I had to get something recorded soon if I was going to even have an episode this week, but what that something was going to be just wasn't clear to me. And then it hit me. Clarity. That's what I should be talking about, because as business owners and people in generally, there are a lot of moments in our life where clarity just takes a vacation without us. Our minds start spinning out of control, thinking of all the things, and very little of it actually matters. Try as we might, we just can't seem to bring things together in a way that makes sense. And yet we know we still have to move forward. We have obligations and responsibilities to meet. We have promises to our clients, our audience, and ourselves that we really do want to keep. And there are those ever looming deadlines waiting in the future. So, how do you find clarity when it seems to be hiding? Well, there are a lot of things that contribute to clarity. And for me, I do believe that it's a personal journey to figure out what works for you. And honestly, it can vary from day to day. So let me share with you what worked for me to get clarity and finally sit down and get today's episode recorded. But first, let me introduce myself. I am Teresa Schloop, a brand strategist and web designer, and the self-proclaimed original caffeine creative. You can learn more about who I am and what I do at caffeinecreative.io. And if you want to connect with me, coffee is always on and conversations are free. Simply book a consultation from the homepage of my website and let's chat. All right, now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit better, and thank you so much for tuning in. I love connecting with you in this way. Let's turn our focus back to gaining a little bit of clarity. Now, the Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines clarity as the state of having a full, detailed, and orderly mental grasp of something, which is exactly what I was missing when planning today's episode. So I started doing a little web surfing to see what others had to say about clarity. And while I didn't come up on anything earth-shattering, groundbreaking, or phenomenal that I had to share, there was a lot of very common reoccurring themes. And a lot of it, to me, came down to the fact that clarity starts with self-care. If we want to have a clear view on where we are and where we want to be, we need to first take care of ourselves, which I know is very counterintuitive for us small business owners trying to do all the things to make all the dreams happen. And I also have to admit, in all of the busyness this week, self-care wasn't at the top of my list. Recognizing this gave me the permission I needed to shift gears, pivot, and do something a little bit different. So rather than pushing through and starting yet another brainstorming document to try and plan today's episode, I shut down my computer, walked away, and did a little bit of self-care. By taking care of me first for just a little bit of time, I was able to clear away some of the cobwebs in my brain. And that's exactly what I needed to be able to get things done that I needed to get done. Now, self-care can take on a lot of different forms. And today, for me, it took on the form of getting back on track with how I want to live in my day-to-day life, which here's what that meant. First, time to journal. This is actually the first thing that I tried to help me gain a little bit of clarity. And while it usually is all I need, today it wasn't working, which is why the following steps were necessary. So now journaling didn't work for me today, but I do know it was one of the things that I have been forgetting. In fact, it had been 2 weeks since I had journaled. And since journaling usually is pretty helpful for me, I still want to give it a little bit of love, because it is one of the best tools that I have found for building the life and business of my dreams. As Barb Davis from the podcast Small Business Sweet Spot said in one of her episodes a few months ago, it's not the act of journaling, it's the self-awareness and reflection and aha that come out of journaling. Now, I do not remember exactly which episode she said that in. I could probably go back and figure it out, but I am just going to link directly to her podcast because it's a great podcast and it's worth listening. And I know that quote really stuck with me because I wrote it on a Post-it note and I've been staring at it for the last few months. So I thought it was a good day to share that quote. Again, definitely check out Barb's podcast because it is great and a fun listen. Now, back to journaling. I know you may be thinking journaling just isn't for you, but I want to give you a little tip here to give it a try. Just try it without all of the rules and the limiting beliefs that we tend to build up around journaling. So here's what I used to share with my life coaching clients who are hesitant to journal. The first rule of journaling is that there are no rules. No perfect way to do it, no fancy book required, and you get to say whatever you want. This isn't your memoir, it's a place to organize your thoughts and let go of limiting beliefs that are stuck in your brain. Number 2 thing to remember about journaling is if you feel off, stressed, overwhelmed, or just plain old crappy, make time to journal. You don't have to spend hours and hours pouring your heart and soul into the pages of your journal. Even just a minute or 2 can make a huge difference. And I have some journal ideas for you below that I think will help. Number 3, a rule of journaling, where there are no rules, I should say, is to be as honest as you can in the moment. Sometimes facing what is really going on in our mind sucks, and there really isn't any other better word for it. And in those moments, we just need to face things in stages. Okay? Face what you can today. The rest will reveal itself when you're ready. Far too many people get caught up in 100% honesty that they're not ready to face, so they avoid journaling. So, face what you are ready to face. The rest will come out later on. And finally, embrace your punctuation and spelling errors. Your English teacher isn't going to be reading this, and you get an A plus by simply putting pen to paper. Stop worrying about perfection and let the words flow in all of their imperfections. It is the ideas that you need to get out, the thoughts that you need to process, and the decisions that is going to help you make with the clarity that you gain by simply putting pen to paper. Now, there are a lot of ways to journal, but here are the two that I find the most helpful. First is a 60-second brain dump. This is exactly what it sounds like. Set a timer for 60 seconds and write down everything that pops into your head. It doesn't have to make sense, and none of it has to go together. Just write it out. When the timer goes off, take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Then put your pen and paper down and add in a little bit of movement. This could be something as simple as starting a load of laundry, but it gives you the space you need for that moment to pause and to gain the clarity that you were looking for in the moment. The next journaling exercise that I find to be the most helpful is morning pages. And this I am borrowing from the book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it's very simple. Start each morning off by writing 3 pages in your journal. You get to decide how big your journal is, and you can choose a very small journal so that the pages aren't so much. The only rule you have is to write at least 3 pages. Even if you write the words, I have no idea what I'm going to write about today, but I'm supposed to do morning pages, so I'm going to write this until something else comes into my mind. The key is to write. Just putting that pen to paper, even writing nonsense such as, I have no idea what I'm going to say today, is going to get your brain engaged and help the words start to flow to where you can gain the clarity that you need. Okay, so like I said a few moments ago, journaling wasn't doing it for me. Honestly, it was not helping, and I was still feeling a little bit lost, confused, and overwhelmed. So then I decided to go to the second thing in self-care to help myself gain a little bit of clarity, and that is no more sacrificing my nutrition. I have always been a little bit of a health nut, but even I can head down the give me all the junk food street, or worse, I will eat later avenue. These are bad habits held over from my own childhood where food was optional and junk food was kind of a requirement. These habits always derail me, and they leave me feeling tired, cranky, and unclear in my thoughts. So, despite my brain telling me you have a lot to do today, I took the time to make myself a really yummy, nutrient dense breakfast. The food definitely helped, but so did the process of making it. The act of cooking and plating my meal, then cleaning everything up after I ate, gave me this sense of normalcy and routine, which really helped calm the panic that was going on in my mind. And this led me to even more clarity. The next thing that I did, because I was starting to feel good and thought, I can push through now, but I decided I wasn't going to compromise my self care. So I did the next step, which is to exercise. Movement like swapping out the laundry or picking up the house can honestly help, but it's not always enough. So actually exercising, like hopping on my treadmill for 30 minutes or my stationary bike, or even just 20-minute session with some hand weights always clears my mind in a way that nothing else can. In fact, some of my best ideas come through when I'm exercising. Now, I am not some hardcore exercise fanatic, and if you saw me, you would know that I'm not. But that little bit of movement gets the energy flowing, clears my brain, and it makes me feel so much better. So, I definitely recommend this as a self care tip if you're looking for any. After my exercise, I began picking up my house and decluttering. Now, my husband and I are pretty neat people by nature, but there are times when our neat and orderly house can get a little bit out of control. Like when we have a really busy week and we're out of the house a couple days and we're getting ready for vacation. So I cranked up the music on my Alexa speakers and I got to work picking up the house a bit and clearing away some of the clutter that has built up. It's a windy gray day outside here, so I also lowered my bamboo shades that we have in place in the windows, and I lit some candles throughout the house to give everything a more cozy and comfortable feel. That little bit of freshening up just made me feel good. It made me want to work. It made me want to snuggle in and dive into the work of the day. But I had one more thing on my checklist of self-care that I was not going to compromise, and that is keeping my work in working hours. So by the time I got done doing all the things, it was time that I normally sit down and take a break from work to have lunch. As I had spent the morning taking care of myself, there was that part of my brain that was telling me to skip lunch and dive into work. So truth be told, I was feeling a little bit guilty by taking the morning off when I'd already had so much time off and away from my desk this week. But I also knew that time had been important. And for me, guilt only has one purpose, and that is to signal in my brain that something is not quite right and I need to rethink what my beliefs are popping up and which ones I need to let go of. Like feeling guilty that I want to stick to my working hours and take care of myself. So I decided and chose not to listen to that part of my brain because it was the one who made bad choices all week and led me to feeling a bit chaotic anyway. And we all saw how that worked out for me. It didn't. So I wasn't about to take its advice again. Instead, I sat down and I had some lunch. I understand it is so easy to convince ourselves that we just need to push through and keep going when things feel stressed, especially when there's a lot of things going on and we have so many things on our to-do list and the list just keeps growing. But it also isn't necessary to push through and keep going most of the time. Sure, I skipped work for the morning taking care of me, but after that, I was able to sit down and truly be productive. All of that time I spent on self-care allowed me to clear my mind and empower me to where I was ready to dive in. And after that, I launched a website. I followed up with a couple of clients. I did some administrative tasks that I needed to get done before I went on vacation. I addressed 2 other client things that needed to be taken care of, and I finalized the notes for this podcast. I even recorded the podcast, and I'm about to start working on my show notes, and I still have time left in my workday. Taking a break to care for yourself, even for just a moment, is an investment in your overall well-being and success. You know when you need a break, so listen to yourself. Take time for you and let go of that guilt. I promise you it is so much better than pushing through. Thanks for tuning in to the Solo Grind. If this episode gave you the chance to pause, to breathe, and to remember you are not the only one who loses clarity sometimes, please rate, review, and subscribe. It helps other solo business owners find the clarity that they didn't know they needed. And please feel free to connect with me anytime at caffeinecreative.io. And remember, clarity doesn't usually arrive on schedule, but it always shows up when you let it in.